Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast Modern Couples, What Your Therapist Never Told You. My name is Rick Miller.
My name is Lilian Borges.
We're thrilled that you've joined us today, and we have a doozy of an episode called The Yellers.
The Yellers.
What do you think?
I think sometimes we find couples in our office that they get so upset about some issues that they yell. They start screaming, they start yelling in your office.
I actually think they find me because I have a lot of them.
You do, yes. I used to have much more. Nowadays, I don't know what happened. Either they don't go somewhere else, or maybe I have better way of controlling them. I don't know.
You have the magical powers now of bringing them down.
Exactly. But what I can say is that this is very taxing on the therapist. And I think it's very taxing on the relationship as well. Because when you're yelling, you're not communicating.
Correct. Yes. You know this because I told you last week when we met that I was sitting with a couple where one of them was yelling really intensely 3 weeks ago, and I tightened my body to cope with it, and I threw my back out.
Ooh.
And that's never happened to me when couples yell, but I, as a therapist, make it a habit to interrupt people, because the thing to think about as yellers, particularly in a therapy session, is what are you trying to communicate here? What is the point? And I would say outside of therapy too, feel free to yell. Maybe the feeling that people think that they have, it's okay. It's really not okay. And what's the point? What is the point of yelling? Isn't there a better way to communicate? Isn't there a more effective way to let your needs be known? Because yelling only sets up the bar of intensity and only causes your partner to be defensive.
You said many important things here. So one of them is the therapist, our job is to manage the intensity.
Yeah.
Because if it's too much, too emotional dysregulation, then we cannot do our work. And second is help them formulate what they want to say. What are you trying to say with your words? Use your words, use your communication. And I think one of the biggest things that makes people yell is not wanting or not knowing or not feeling good about being vulnerable.
Oh, that's a really good one.
They do not want to just ask for what they want. They don't want to express their vulnerabilities. They don't know what they are. They don't know what they want.
And I know you're implying this, but that is no reason to yell. It's like raising your voice and getting louder doesn't help the expression of experience or communication.
Well, I don't see that as excuse or they are trying to do something. I think that it comes from emotional dysregulation.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. They do not know how to communicate, so they start escalating. And when you are escalated in your feelings, then you do a lot of generalization. You never do this to me, or you never.
You always.
You always. And you start pointing fingers. And of course, the other person is going to match your intensity, match your dysregulation. And this is when escalations start happening and people start yelling. What I'm trying to say is, when you go into a more vulnerable state and you talk about what you want instead of yelling or setting boundaries, then you take it to the conversation to a different place.
Okay, so let me respond to that piece. And thinking about one of the men that I work with, I don't see him for couples therapy, but I see him for anger management, amongst other things. And he loses his temper a lot with his wife. And he can predict when she's going to be irritated, and then he presents in an angry way before she's actually irritated. So I spend a lot of time with him trying to help him discern, what are you feeling in this moment inside of your body? What are you reacting to? So first he has to figure out what he's feeling, and then he has the choice to slow things down. I'm exaggerating it by slowing things down right now, and then decide, do I want to be angry or do I want to present myself in another way? And I think that this is what happens for people. They get activated and they don't realize that they actually have a choice about how they want to use their voice, which words they want to choose in the interactions, and what they want the outcome to be based on what they're bringing to their spouse. He is working on this with some success, I have to say.
Thanks to you.
Well, yeah.
But this is the work that we do,
Yep.
right?
Yes.
Helping people understand where their feelings coming from, why this upsets me.
Yeah.
Sometimes some people feel upset by feeling something. As I said, they feel uncomfortable. This is vulnerable to me. I don't like that. My wife is asking me this, or my husband is asking me this. I don't want to talk about this. They're going to fight with me. They're not happy with me. I feel uncomfortable. So I get angry to say, back away. I don't want to do this. So it is a way to push the other person. Anger can be, and as anxiety can be, a secondary emotion. You have a more vulnerable feeling.
Yes.
Being afraid, being sad, being hurt is not so comfortable. So I get angry so I don't get in touch with that.
I totally agree. I see that all the time. My clients just, boom, they go right to anger and they don't even recognize that there are other feelings that are beneath that because anger is the go-to place.
Especially if you are raised, right, in a culture that because of your gender, you can't express vulnerability, you can't cry. So you just express the anger and other feelings that are not as vulnerable. Or if you're raised in a family that sadness or anger is not acceptable, so then you're only going to express one feeling, which is not good psychologically.
And then there's cultures where anger is totally acceptable. So people feel justified to be angry in their response because that's how their families interact.
Yes.
I think something to think about is when you're told, meaning you as a member in a partnership, that you're too angry at a particular moment, do you listen or do you only get more angry? Because a lot of times when I intervene with the couples that I work with, by pushing the person that's angry, they feel justified in their anger and they keep yelling. And then they get even louder because they feel like I'm trying to control them, when in fact, I'm not trying to control them. I'm trying to get them to express themselves in a way that they can actually be heard more and understood more by their partners.
Well, sometimes people don't feel understood.
Yeah.
And this is when they get exasperated and they start increasing their voice.
Yeah.
One thing that I saw that is very effective for people like that is empathy, empathizing.
Yeah.
Saying, I know that you are feeling not heard right now, that you're trying to communicate. Nobody is listening to you.
Wow.
That feels yucky. You want to be heard.
Okay. Question. Are you implying that this is what you should do as a therapist or as a partner?
One of the biggest things that I remember being a couples therapist is everything that goes around comes around. Be aware of couples where one person is yelling and screaming and the other person is cool and collected.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What is the other person that is cool and collected is doing to trigger the other that is yelling out of their mind? A lot of times there is an insensitivity. There is a person that only does things according to their reality or rules, not taking into consideration the other. There is some unfairness happening, and the other person who feels less power or being treated unfair is trying to communicate and can't be listened to or heard. this is when they start feeling desperate. They are trying to fight for, not against, not with, but for the relationship, for the connection.
But are you saying that's the yeller or the quiet?
The yeller.
What you're breaking down, which I really appreciate, is the reasons why people yell.
Yeah.
And sometimes being the recipient or even in the same room as a yeller, a therapist, is not the recipient of the yeller.
No.
But the energy is just so strong. That energy takes over and it's harder to get underneath what's really going on. I'm glad you can find a space to elicit the vulnerability in the people that are working with you. And I'm hoping that they can get themselves to understand and appreciate that, and that their partners can appreciate watching the yeller go from yeller to more vulnerable.
And sometimes that's hard. That's very hard because they learn that being vulnerable, people will not listen anyway. So they think that I will make you listen.
It never really works.
It never really works. Otherwise, they would not be in our office. You said something interesting, that people sometimes feel that they have the right to yell. They feel this righteousness. And I think this righteousness comes from, I will not let you treat me like that anymore. Mm-hmm. And it might be directed to the partner. It might be that it comes from childhood or other relationships where they were mistreated, not treated fairly. So they come from this place of, I will not let you abuse me anymore. I will not let you talk to me like this anymore. I will not let anyone treat me this way.
Okay, now sometimes that's conscious and sometimes it's unconscious, that they're playing out a reactivity to a family member that never let them be without even knowing that they're doing it.
Exactly. Sometimes it is conscious, sometimes it is unconscious. Or I would say both. They see that consciously, right? But they sometimes don't know where it comes from. And when you connect those two ends, that makes sense to them.
Yep. I'm working with a guy with anger management issues, and we're peeling back the layers of his history to appreciate where this is stemming from. And basically for him, indeed, it's a very vulnerable experience of having a father that was angry and abusive and was never called to task by his wife, my client's mother, or anyone else in the family. So he got away with being angry and mischaracterizing and gaslighting everyone in the family. And so my client grew up recognizing that within himself was a feeling of powerlessness, and it doesn't matter how he treated people, and that the model of getting things done was through being angry, which is an unfortunate model.
A lot of times, anger or the yelling comes out of desperation, comes out of trying to protect themselves, comes out of a very vulnerable and hurt or deep place. That is not a powerful place, by the way. It might look like, and again, what comes around goes around. It is going to affect the relationship. If your partner is not differentiated, if your partner doesn't know how to separate me and you, the partner will react to that in probably two ways. Either going to yell back as a protection or defense mechanism, or they're going to shut down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Either way, neither way, communication is possible.
Yeah. I've had a couple of good sessions with one of my yeller couples, and they know that they're yellers and they're both defensive with each other and they take turns yelling, and we have a great relationship. And I use a lot of humor with them, not when they're yelling per se, but they trust me. And so I interrupt them or I point out when they're yelling, and they are able to bring themselves down, each person as an individual, reword what they're trying to say in a way that's more palatable, that's more gentle, that's more vulnerable, and it makes a huge difference.
There are differences in intensity. Mm-hmm. There are people, there are couples, they're more intense, right? I remember visiting a friend of mine in a different city. I stayed with her family, and I was in my room, and then I saw people yelling, and I came out. It was just like, thought that they were fighting or something was happening. They were just talking and discussing politics, and everybody was loud, and I was just like, wow. And couples like that, they tend to be more intense, and they fight for connection. When they are talking like that, they are actually connecting. You might feel as a therapist uncomfortable, but we have to see, is that being a problem, or they are just struggling their way through to get their communication or their message out?
Well, it makes me think about my own relationship, that we're two Jewish men that grew up in households where expressive and being animated was okay. And there are times when we're with our friends who will accuse us of fighting. And I'm like, we're really not fighting. We're totally fine. But it's so foreign to them because everything isn't getting stuffed under the rug.
Yes. Yes.
What was your household like growing up vis-a-vis yelling?
No, actually, my household, my mom was the yeller and everybody was quiet. So my mom was the only one that had a loud voice.
Did it get her anywhere?
No. But it's interesting that when we just started doing the podcast, your way of communicating and wanting to get different ideas first took me back as if you were fighting with me. I was just like,
really?
Oh, yeah.
Huh.
Right in the episode, you said, oh, no, I like having discussions. And I was just, oh, yeah, this is who he is. Oh, that's going to be interesting.
So tell me how you perceived it as me fighting with you.
I think that you felt animated by having different ideas, excited.
Yeah.
And then that animation, and then saying, I don't think I like that. And then not agreeing with me. I felt that as almost like as an attack, the way that you did it.
Wow.
And it took me a little, but I got in that episode, that's who you were. And I said, okay, you don't have to take it personally. He is not fighting with you. He likes doing this. He likes talking about ideas and getting excited about that. He's Jewish, for God's sake. So don't you know that?
So this is how we avoided being the yellers.
This is how we avoid being the yellers. We avoid being the yellers by not wanting conflict or confrontation.
Oh, I meant as a healthy way. By figuring out a style that worked based on our differences and hearing each other and making space for the differences all at once, rather than overpowering or getting louder or getting more intense.
Yes. We try to understand how our partners work. I try to understand why he's talking that way. If I don't use this understanding, and whether it is with you or any partner that I have or friend, I might misunderstand you a lot because I'm only using my lenses that I got from my own perspective, from my childhood. And then I will have a lot of misunderstanding and conflict.
This is great.
And I will fight with you a lot. But if I can get out of my shoes and put myself in your shoes, and this is so crucial for couples, for relationships, we need to create this theory of mind. What do I think, who I operate, and how my partner operate? How can we use both manuals to live happily?
Well, sometimes as I sit with couples and I do the same thing over and over again, which is getting a partner still and quiet so that they can both hear but really understand what their partner is saying to them.
Yes.
It's kind of simple, except when you're being pushed to do it, a part of you may not want to do that. Again, people would rather yell than they would modulate themselves.
Again, I think it is a difficulty of being vulnerable.
Yeah.
It is a very difficult thing. It's not only for everybody.
Right.
To show who we really are, to ask for you really want, say your fears or ask Could you hug me now? I feel bad. Or that sometimes it's impossible for some couples. I've seen that. It is hard for me sometimes to ask for what I want because I was grown very independent. So it is difficult. So sometimes it comes out of not wanting to be vulnerable, not wanting to express. So we go into, you never hug me. You never show your affection to me.
Yeah.
That doesn't get anywhere.
Well, we should do a whole episode on vulnerability because it's such a powerful, profound topic that weaves in all aspects of couples' lives.
Yeah. Or avoidance.
Yeah.
Right. So we try to show this persona or this false self, this person that we are not, right? And that never works in relationships.
So what are your takeaways, or do you feel as though you just covered them?
Well, I think that a few things, when you're yelling, you're not communicating. So think about what you really want to communicate. And sometimes if you don't know, you might need help to talk to a friend or a therapist to figure that out and communicate that. I also think, ask yourself, what is underneath my anger? What is that is making me so angry that I cannot talk to my partner? I also say, sometimes there are traumas or things that you didn't get that is also affecting your relationship. So sometimes it's good to take inventory, see what you're trying to have in your relationship, have conversations about your partner, what is important to you in a relationship. How about you?
A couple things. One is that in order to avoid yelling, I think we need to be attuned with our bodies and begin to pay attention to what's going on. So whether it be vulnerability, sadness, not feeling understood, that we recognize what's happening within ourselves in order to figure out an alternate approach rather than yelling. The other thing that's a takeaway is for the partner of the yeller or the partner of the person that yells, what are the ways in which you can listen to your partner and convey to them that you are hearing them? It's a way of encouraging people to feel good at their listening skills and to be good at understanding. And hopefully the person that yells won't feel compelled to yell quite as much. And I want to highlight one of your points, which is that we in partnerships can take a deep dive into appreciating our own baggage and where we grew up and what our families were like and why we are the way we are today in relationships. That's a really important part of doing couples work and an important part of being successful in couplehood.
Yes, that's great.
It feels like we just started today. I don't know why it feels different today, but time flew.
Yes.
Anyways, so another episode. Thank you everyone for joining us for The Modern Couples, What Your Therapist Never Told You, and we will see you next time.
See you next time.
Take care.